Today we are continuing the Shema, laws of the Shema, and today we're going to talk about the blessings, the brachos associated with the Shema. So we're going to talk about the bracha today known as Yotzer Or. Okay? So we actually start the Siman, we start this chapter going over the blessing itself, and we're going to try to work between two different sidurim if we can. I'm going to focus on the Ashkenaz one and then try to flip to the Sephardi one as well, as best as I can. So we're going to start with the Sidur Ashkenaz, the Nusach, for the way it's written in the Sidur, based on the custom of Ashkenazim. So we're going to start. This is for the bracha of Shacharis. Yotzer Or is a bracha for Shacharis, and that's what we're going to look at that blessing. Okay, so we've already talked about Baruch Hu. Now we're going to talk about the Shema, and we're talking about the time for the Shema. Now we're talking about Yotzer Or. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch starts by quoting the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. You are the source of blessing, Hashem, our master of the universe, king of the world, who creates light, Yotzer Or, who creates light, Uvorei Choshech, and who creates darkness. Okay, so there's more like fashioning light and creating darkness. So the Shulchan Aruch explains, why do we write both of those? Yotzer Or, Uvorei Choshech. Right? So they enacted, meaning the Anshe Knesset Hagadola, they enacted to mention the measure of night for the daytime in order to exclude the thoughts or the philosophies of the Apikoresim, the people who are influenced by, who were at the time influenced by Greek philosophy, and people who stray from the truth of the Torah. Because they would say that there were those who would argue that the one who created the light is not the one who created the darkness. Okay, that's what they would say. Now, that is actually not a Greek thing; that's a Zoroastrian thing. But nonetheless, they believed that they wanted to exclude people from saying that as well, or they were trying to exclude those who say that there's more than one force in the world. So that's the statement that they make. The Mishna Berurah has one comment over here. So you're supposed to take a little break, he says, between Yotzer and Or. Yotzer Or. Okay? So you shouldn't hear it pronounced as Yotzer. Right? So Yotzer Or. Okay? So also the problem is that a lot of people, in terms of the way people pronounce their words, used to be the R used to be a guttural sound, Aish, like that. So for whatever reason, it became platal, probably based on influences from other European languages, and so it would sound as Yotzer Or. Okay, you shouldn't say that. Yotzer. They're worried about people saying, if you don't put that little break, Yotzer Or, you're pronouncing it that way. But if you pronounce it properly, Yotzer Or wouldn't be a problem. So if you are a platal reish person, you are you pronounce it with the front half of your tongue, like you roll the R's in Spanish, okay? Or if you listen to song players like Roy Rogers and it's coming off the end of your teeth, Yotzer Or is how you would pronounce that. Now, let's say you made an oopsie and you started davening Mariv. Mariv starts with, after Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, it says Asher Bivaro Ma'ariv Arvim. Let's say you start saying that. Then you go, whoopsies, it's daytime. It starts to be Yotzer Or. So then you stop there and you go, Yotzer Or Vorei Choshech. Okay, and then you finish with Yotzer HaMe'oros. Right, so you finish with the right end of the blessing. you fulfilled your obligation. But if you said the entire Arvit blessing, entire Mari blessing, Asher Bivaro Mari Varvim, and you don't say Yotzer order anywhere, even if you finish, or you don't finish with the words Yotzer HaMeoros, you have not fulfilled the obligation. You must repeat the entire blessing. If you said Yotzer or Avore Choshech, Asher Bivaro Ma'ariv Aravim, let's say you mush them together, but you start with Yotzer or, and you finish with Ma'ariv Aravim, you also don't fulfill your obligation. And the Ramah continues, so too, if you didn't say, if all you said was Yotzer or, and you finish the blessing with Ma'ariv Aravim, you also don't fulfill the obligation. Okay? The Shulchan Aruch also continues now. He says, if you finish with Yotzer HaMeoros, and you started with Yotzer or, then you fulfill the obligation. Okay, even if you put Ma'ariv Aravim in there for whatever crazy reason. Like, you totally mess up the blessing. As long as you get Yotzer or Avore Choshech, and you end with Yotzer HaMeoros, even if you screw up the rest of the blessing, you have fulfilled your obligation. So, it feels like it might be a bad thing. Okay? So, the Gra has a good explanation of this. He says that you need two things. One, you have to start the blessing with Yotzer or, okay? Or at least at some point in the long blessing say it. And the second one has to say Yotzer HaMeoros. If you miss any one of these, you haven't fulfilled the obligation. So that seems to be what the Ramah's point is. Okay? Yotzer or is one of my favorite blessings for some reason. It's actually a very pretty blessing. It says, it's referring to the fact that Hashem really focuses on guiding the world in its processes. That the world should not feel that it's not left with some type of purpose. Okay, so going back to explain a few things now. There is a statement, okay, in the Shulchan Aruch that says that you remember immediately and say Yotzer or after you start with Ma'ariv Aravim. So the Mishnah Berurah says that if you correct the blessing and you say within the amount of time of correcting your statement, because it's going to toch kedei dibor. Okay? Meaning you say, Asher bivaro ma'ariv aravim, Yotzer or Avore Choshech. But if you take a break in there at all, then you have to start the blessing over. Because the first half of the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, doesn't go on to the words Yotzer or if you don't include it within the actual same breath that you are pronouncing it. Okay? So when we said later on in this halacha that you don't say Yotzer or, it's meaning that you don't say it immediately. So when he said immediately at the beginning, he meant immediately. And when you wait, it was if you waited longer than not being immediate. Okay. Now, there are some people who say that if you delayed it until later in the blessing, that would be okay too. So as long as you say it at some point in the blessing, they hold that you can go ahead and fulfill your obligation. As long as you say Yotzer or Avore Choshech, and then you say Yotzer HaMeoros, and that's the way that that people should conduct themselves. Okay, so even though you started with Baruch Atah Hashem Yotzer HaMeoros, so you mess up in the middle somewhere, okay, and start talking about the evening time, you would then have to start over from the beginning of Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. And the reason why is because the blessing is completely messed up. And he goes into more detail in the Biur Halacha, which we'll come back to that we'll have to come back to that another time because it's too involved in like teaches halacha here. Okay, so everyone agrees that the end of the blessing needs to be the same as the beginning. Okay, so if you change Yotzer HaMeoros, no good. The question is if you mix up the words in between between the beginning of the blessing and Yotzer HaMa'oros. Okay. So the point is that you always have to finish that way. So you have to somewhere in there make sure that Yotzer or Vorei Choshech is abutting Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam at some point in there, because then it becomes pertinent to the Yotzer HaMa'oros that you're talking about in the blessing itself. Okay, so even if you accidentally put Ma'ariv Arivim there somewhere, as long as you were able to put Yotzer order next to or within reach of Yotzer HaMa'oros, even though it's a much longer blessing, it goes on for lots of stanzas, you have to at the very least have mentioned it in there before you get to the end. Okay? Now, even if you said all of Yotzer Or, okay, but you messed up the end of it, that's what we're saying is no good. So you went through the whole blessing. So in Nusach Ashkenaz, you go from Yotzer Or, Vorei Choshech, Oseh Shalom, Vorei Esakol, and then you start with Hameir La'aretz Adar Malea. And then you have another paragraph, Tisparach Suridim Malkinu V'Golenu B'Rei Kedoshim. And then you have Hashem Hakel HaMelech HaGadol. And then you have the two parts of Kedusha. And then L'Kel Baruch L'Imo Zil HaMelech Kel Chai V'Kiyam Zimro Shemiru V'Tzish V'Shemiru. Right? So then all this stuff. HaMachadish V'Chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh V'Reishis Ka'amor Lo'oseh Orim Gedolim Ki Lam Chasto. Or Chadash Al Tzion Ta'ir V'Nizkech Kulanu Meheira L'Orai. Right? You say that at the very end of the blessing, that you will shine a new light on this place, and then you say Yotzer HaMa'oros at the very end. So even if you said all of that, if you don't say Yotzer or Vorei Choshech, you're leaving out an integral part of the blessing itself. Okay, so because you have to make sure that they are complete with each other. Okay. Let's see. Do you want to move on to the next halacha? Let's see. All right, so you made the mistake, and you didn't start the blessing of Ahava Rabbah yet in the morning, okay? Because the second blessing is Ahava Rabbah. Okay. So you should then go on to say Ahava Rabbah next, and then repeat the blessing of Yotzer or after that. Okay. Let's go on to the next halacha. This halacha 3. Okay, some people say that the kedusha that's in Yotzer is permitted to be said by a single person and does not need a whole congregation. Okay, because as I mentioned just a second ago, by the time you get to the third paragraph in it with Shem Hakel HaMelech, you're going to recite the kedusha in there, because it's only a recitation of what goes on and it's not a davar sheba kedusha. Some people say you should skip it, and it is not recited unless you are in the congregation. You have at least 9 other people with you, and so therefore he recommends that a person should recite it with the Torah trup, like one is reciting the Torah, to be concerned about that. The Ramah says that the minhag is like the first opinion, and a first person can recite the whole kedusha in the first blessing, and you can recite it out loud, okay? And you recite it out loud with the congregation, okay? But you are also seated for this one. Okay, so going on the statement that one should skip it. So what does that look like? So the Mishnah Berurah explains that it says that you should say the words for Omrim Berurah Kadosh, and then go to V'Ha'ofrim Chayos HaKodesh, right? And Omrim, and then you see the word Baruch. So you make mention of that's what they say, but you don't say the actual verse itself. He says, and he also adds over here in the name of the Pri Chadash, that as long as you're in shul and there's a minyan there, you can recite it according to this opinion, even though you're reciting it quietly. Okay. Okay. So some people say the minhag is to recite it. However, the Mishnah Berurah brings down that it's nice to follow the first opinion because the Vilna Gaon was strict. So therefore, if you aren't reciting it in the congregation, you should recite it with the ta'amim, with the trup, the haftarah trup that accompanies them. And you'll see in some Sidurim it's actually written in there. Okay. And also when recited out loud, it should only be in a congregation when you're reciting it out loud with the Shliach Tzibur there. Okay, so the halacha, let's move on to the next halacha Daled. So this blessing of the Shema, it should be recited slowly alongside with the Shliach Tzibur, with the person leading the congregation. So you should, nonetheless, as you should try to get a little speed up to finish before the Shliach Tzibur finishes his blessing, so that way you have time to answer Amen after the Shliach Tzibur. Now, if you don't recite the whole blessing and you just listen to it from the Shliach Tzibur completely, then you fulfill your obligation. So the Shliach Tzibur is reciting it loud enough for you to hear it, and you listen along. The reason why is because the goal of the Shliach Tzibur is to fulfill the obligation of all the other people attending the minyan. So even if you know the blessing yourself, you can rely on the Shliach Tzibur to fulfill your obligation. However, you can't do that unless there's a minyan there. So you can't have a Shliach Tzibur fulfilling other people's obligations. Okay. However, you don't recite Amen after Habocher Be'amo Yisrael B'Yahava because you don't want to put a break in between that and the Shema itself. So we mentioned earlier about this idea that if you're listening to the recitation of Shemona Esrei, that a lot of people find it difficult to follow along. We mentioned it in passing. We haven't really gotten to the essential part of that. We said that basically if a person knows the tefillah, they shouldn't rely on it. However, the blessings of Shema are more of a mitzvah thing and they're recited more slowly. So therefore, one could technically rely on it in this case if they sit along and listen to the Shliach Tzibur quietly. We just don't do that anymore because most people don't recite it slow enough. Okay, so and also if the Shliach Tzibur finishes before you get to the end of your own blessing, you cannot answer Amen. You definitely don't say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. Okay, so that would not be appropriate. So, and you can recite it if you finish ahead of time and hear a blessing from somebody else. You can answer Amen to their bracha as well, but not somebody else. And you can also say somebody else, but not in the middle of your own blessing. So if you finish and hear somebody else's, that would be okay. Okay. So again, when you're trying to fulfill your obligation, you have to focus, and the Shliach Tzibur has to focus. Okay. And we said that this works for all of these blessings of Kriya Shema and all types of brachos as well, as long as they are pertinent to a mitzvah. Okay, but you can't. And again, he says over here that you can't rely on that for tefillah when you already know the blessings. Okay, we said that already a few times. And let's see. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch says over here that when we see in a minyan for Berachos Kriya Shema, he says it for Berachos Kriya Shema, and he also adds it for all other morning blessings. However, other blessings for mitzvos and blessings that you recite over eating food, so Berachos HaMitzvos and Berachos HaNahanyan, one person can fulfill another person's obligation since it's a unique obligation that's unique and personal. Okay, so therefore I could recite the blessing for bread, or recite the blessing for wine, and fulfill your obligation because we're all going to sit down here and have a meal together. So, and however, if it's two people reciting blessings for each other, when it comes to after the blessing after meals, so Birkas Hamazon, they should actually recite that to themselves if the other person knows it. But if he doesn't know it, then one can recite it for the other person. Okay, we also just said that one shouldn't say Amen in between the blessing at the end of Ahava Rabbah and the Shema, because that would be a break. Okay, and the Mishnah Berurah says a break between Kriya Shema and the blessing before it. Okay, and you're not, and because it's a blessing that's pertinent to the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, therefore you're not allowed to have a break, he says. Okay, but you can say Amen after Yotzer HaMa'oros because that's not the blessing that's perfectly attached to the other one. All right, moving on to the next halacha. Oh, the common custom over here is not to say Amen, but to actually finish the blessing with the Shliach Tzibor, so that way he would not say Amen, okay, or to finish right after them, or to start the Shema afterwards. Now, it's interesting that later on, the Ramah actually brings down that Habocher Mo Yisrael B'Ahava. He actually said, the Ramah says actually their minhag was to say Amen. And he said that should be the minhag. Okay? And so he says the reason why is because the blessings aren't really attached to the Shema as part of the mitzvah itself. So answering Amen shouldn't be a problem. However, they, that you should say Amen. However, it's better to follow the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch and not required to say Amen in between there. And this is also the opinion of the Vilna Gaon. He also says to finish it with him. Okay. So he basically says the Vilna Gaon basically argues that the blessings are pertinent, like the other Rishonim, like that those blessings are pertinent to the recitation of the Shema itself. So therefore, you should try to finish it with them and not rely on the other opinions. Let's see over here. Let's get. Actually, you know what? Let's stop there because this is a good place to stop because then we'll start talking about more mistakes, and we'll pick up next time. We'll pick up next week with the laws of reciting Yotzer Or. So we're gonna have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you more about the blessings of the Shema next week. Take care.